So I really like the Invincible show. People like to compare it to The Boys, which is another good show, don't get me wrong, but Invincible is not really comparable to it. Anyways, I'm going to talk about a character I found really interesting in Invincible, Angstrom Levy. There will obviously be some show spoilers for Invincible in this video, but don't worry about comic spoilers, as I haven't read them, so I won't talk about anything there. Someday, my sweet. Someday. So I'll do a quick recap of Angstrom Levy's backstory real quick for those of you that either haven't seen Invincible or have forgotten why he's attacking Mark even though it's been like a week since the last episode, in which case you might want to see a doctor about that memory problem you got there. Don't worry, this recap will be really quick. So the Angstrom Levy from our Mark's dimension was born with the ability to open portals to every other dimension. He's been using this power to recruit other versions of himself, a large amount of which were saved just before alternate evil versions of Mark killed them. Our Angstrom wants to use the knowledge and memory of every other Angstrom to fix problems all across the multiverse. Some universes have cured cancer, some have eradicated famines, and other fixes to real problems. Angstrom believes that the best way to have the full picture of solutions is to have the memories of every other Angstrom in his head. He recruits a bunch of different Maulers from alternate dimensions to help him build the machine required for this, but Cecil sends Mark to intervene. Angstrom calls all the Maulers he's recruited to prevent Mark from stopping them, but when the Maulers all decide to kill Mark instead of just subduing him, Angstrom takes off his helmet and the overwhelming power of the machine causes it to explode, causing everyone in the building except for one Mauler, Mark, and Angstrom, who now has the memories of every other Angstrom, but without the ability to actually tell what ones are his and what ones aren't, which was one purpose of the machine. So first, I want to touch on something that I've seen a few people say confuses them. Why does Angstrom hate our Mark, one of the only good ones he's seen, and the Mark from his dimension? Is he stupid? Well, no. But he is mentally unstable. Angstrom isn't acting on logic. If he was, he could take 2 seconds to look around, see that Invincible did not take over the world with Omni-Man and kill millions of people, and be like, oh well, I guess this Invincible was chill, I should just leave him alone. If Angstrom was being logical, there would be no conflict. The memories of all the alternate Angstroms, a lot of which witnessed the atrocities of alternate Invincibles and were even saved right before they were killed by Invincible, vastly outnumber the memories of a single Angstrom. This is why he has a breakdown when Mark says that Angstrom tried to save him. Why would Angstrom try to save Super Hitler? Angstrom also blames our Mark for deforming him to begin with. He misremembers the destruction of the machine as Mark purposely destroying it in order to stop Angstrom from creating peace and prosperity across the multiverse. This is due to the other Angstrom's memories of alternate evil Marks, and his own memory, which is distorted to make our Mark evil as well. I also realize that he has the memories of the destruction of the machine from the other Angstroms as well, and because most of them, if not all of them, only know Invincible as evil, they all probably just assumed Mark was another evil one. We even see one of the alternate Angstroms get angry when Invincible shows up. Now you could argue against that last point, as our Angstrom probably told the others how his Invincible was good, and that they overheard our Angstrom yelling to the Maulers to not kill him, but again, I think the countless other memories of Invincible being evil would have outweighed this and distorted the memory to Invincible once again being evil and destroying Angstrom's work. Now I want to talk about Angstrom's ego. One of the largest reasons as to why Angstrom recruits other versions of himself as opposed to, say, I don't know, random scientists from the alternate dimensions is his ego. Angstrom considers himself a genius, and if you're a genius, who else would you recruit to make utopias throughout the multiverse besides you? He also has an extremely, interesting goal. Now don't get me wrong, I think using your ability to travel through dimensions and your knowledge to stop famines and end cancer and things like that in every dimension by sharing technology and knowledge between dimensions is a noble cause and a great use of that ability. But let's be real here, it was never going to be completely successful. Like, people in power could end famine right now, in real life, but it still exists. It's not a lack of ability, it's a lack of want. And I'm sure it's the same in the worlds of Invincible. And wars. Angstrom wants to stop wars in all dimensions because one or two happen to end them. Wars are extremely complicated issues. There's no one cause for any war, and different wars have vastly different circumstances and events leading up to them that shape them. Realistically, it isn't possible to end war. Now that isn't saying we should stop trying, and that isn't a pro-war stance. But let's be real, unless humanity is completely wiped out and there is nothing for anybody to gain from war, war is going to happen. Knowledge from other dimensions ain't suddenly going to make those that benefit from war be like, oh okay, no more. Angstrom has an unbelievably high ego to think that he and other Angstroms could build perfect utopias across the multiverse. When Angstrom is holding Debbie hostage before he sends Mark to the first portal, he tells Mark that he was going to save the world until Mark stopped him. Again, that isn't a slight against him trying. It's an extremely noble and worthwhile cause, but it showcases his huge ego as well. Unless Angstrom installed dictatorships in every dimension, these would still be issues, but even then, there are so many variables. What if the people revolt? What happens when Angstrom's gone? And that's ignoring the fact that utopias and dictatorships are pretty much opposites. Alright, I know thinking about how real world issues could be stopped or prevented but won't be sucked, so I'll move on now. So Angstrom's ego only worsens after the destruction of the machine. I imagine that the other Angstroms probably had egos too, but probably not as large as our Angstrom's because, you know, he's the only one that can open portals. So that probably made it worse. But Angstrom's ego has gotten to the point that he sees everything he does as saving the world from Mark. He tells Debbie that he is saving the world and that he is not the villain, despite the fact that he held an innocent woman and her child hostage, beat her, snapped her arm, and put the child in danger, all just to hurt her innocent son. The reason Angstrom throws Mark around dimensions, rather than just stranding him in one that instantly kills him or something like that, is because of his ego. He says just that when he finally fights Mark head on. While he knew he couldn't face Mark instantly, he thought that if he threw Mark around enough dimensions, Mark would get weak enough for Angstrom to kill him. His ego is so big that he thinks he even has a chance to beat Mark without his portals due to his upgrades. And yeah, that didn't turn out too well. And while the whole, oh, the villain fucks up his very good plan that would have worked because he wants to kill the hero himself thing can be done pretty badly, I think Angstrom is a really good example of it being done right. First of all, he's deranged. Like I said earlier, he isn't acting logically. He's using logic to help in his plan, sure, such as when he tricks Mark into going into the portals, but his mental instability, hatred of Mark, body enhancements, and ego all combine into making it believable that Angstrom would try to kill Mark with his own two hands. So now it's time to talk about the fight between Mark and Angstrom, and man, this seriously might be one of my favorite superhero fights ever. Despite the fact that at first we don't know Angstrom has any body enhancements, so we think that he's just a normal dude, he's still a physical threat to Mark. He can just throw Mark around any dimension he wants. The fight starts with Angstrom having the advantage. He has Debbie and Oliver hostage, and he has the portal ability up his sleeve that Mark doesn't know about. Side note, yeah, he saw the portals when he fought all the Maulers, but there was no way for him to know that those were Angstrom's portals, so he had zero reason to think Angstrom could or would just teleport him out of the house. Anyways, Angstrom continues to have the upper hand the entire fight, only losing it once he decides to attack Mark directly. This advantage of Angstrom's also lends itself perfectly to making the fight extremely tense. Angstrom is all alone with Debbie and Oliver whenever Mark isn't there, and he's so unstable and hates Mark so much that he could do anything to them. Angstrom's unpredictability is why he's such a big threat. Angstrom starts the fight by holding Debbie and Oliver hostage, but it appears as if he only cares about Mark. So there's a thought in the back of your mind while watching that's saying he wouldn't actually physically hurt them, right? After all, he only threw the knife at them because he knew Mark would save them from it. It's not until Debbie says that Angstrom is upset that they are in the one dimension where Mark is good and Angstrom is evil that he starts to beat her. And no, I'm not saying Debbie deserved it. That would be extremely stupid. I love Debbie. Hashtag stan Debbie. My point here is that Angstrom appeared as if he wouldn't actually hurt Debbie and Oliver, but then goes ahead and does just that to up the stakes. The fight is just never-ending tension that is constantly escalating due to Angstrom's instability and unpredictable nature. The threat of Angstrom also deciding to just leave Mark in an alternate dimension at any point is also there. I mean, sure, obviously Mark wouldn't be stuck, as there's gotta be a way out to continue the show, and we see the Guardians of the Globe rescue him from just that later, but Angstrom could at any point just have left Mark in a dimension, killed his family, and fucked off somewhere where Mark would never be able to find him. Even if we know that Mark will somehow find a way back, this fact manages to keep us on edge. And just when we think Mark's got Angstrom, that the fight is over, Angstrom reveals that his body has been enhanced so he can physically keep up with Mark. Not only does it really set the stakes, it also shows that Angstrom was very prepared for this fight. When Debbie fought back, it did nothing. The realization that Debbie could have done nothing at all to stop or get away from Angstrom really sets in here. It looks like Angstrom is actually winning for a little bit, but when Mark finally stops holding back and physically overpowers Angstrom very quickly, we see that Angstrom lost the moment he decided to actually fight Mark head on. And this leads to one of the best moments in the entire show. Mark loses control, stops holding back, and completely destroys Angstrom, killing him in a fit of rage. There's a very obvious parallel here when Omni-Man was beating the shit out of Mark, which is here because this moment happens while Mark is already dealing with fears of becoming his father. Now everybody tells Mark that Angstrom deserved it, and yeah, it's pretty hard to argue against that. But that's not the point to Mark. When Mark says, "I thought you were stronger," he's not just talking about how he thought Angstrom was physically stronger. Mark thought that he was mentally strong enough so that he wouldn't lose control like that. But there's a major aspect here that completely separates Mark from Omni-Man. Mark was not thinking logically. He was completely overtaken by emotion when he killed Angstrom. Angstrom threatened to kill his entire family after having already beaten his mom very brutally, so Mark understandably lost control. Mark was acting purely off of emotion, like he didn't even think about how he would get back if Angstrom was dead. Omni-Man was the opposite. Omni-Man was using logic as a way to distract himself from his emotions. Logically, Omni-Man should be loyal to the Viltrum Empire over a bunch of pathetic humans whose lives are short. Logically, Debbie was a pet to Omni-Man, as while he loved her, he would outlive her by a large amount. Omni-Man killed all of those people because logically, if Mark saw how worthless and fragile human lives are compared to theirs, he would join his father in conquering Earth. Logically, if Omni-Man physically overpowered Mark, Mark would have to join him. Mark's killing of Angstrom actually proves that Mark is not like his dad, but it's perfectly understandable and reasonable as to why Mark would not see it that way. So this part isn't directly about Angstrom, it's about Angstrom's death and its effect on Mark, which is, or at the very least will be, judging by the looks of things, a huge part of Mark's character development. I'll keep this part as brief as possible, as the aftermath of the fight hasn't fully settled yet. Mark is unable to cope with the fact that he lost control and killed someone, that he wanted to kill someone. He's unable to look at Angstrom's body after killing him, and even throws up a little in his mouth because he is physically and morally disgusted with what he just did. We are never shown Angstrom's bashed in face because our imagination is infinitely worse than what we could ever see, and because Mark does not want to be reminded of what he's just done. After returning to Earth, all Mark thinks about is how he's a murderer and that he needs to get stronger so he never loses control and wants to kill someone ever again. Nobody understands that Mark thought he was stronger than killing, but wasn't. When Eve tells Mark, "You don't deserve this," she's talking about how Mark doesn't deserve everything bad that's happened to him. He didn't deserve to have to be the one to stop his dad. He didn't deserve to have Angstrom go after him, and he doesn't deserve to feel awful for killing Angstrom. But Mark takes it as he doesn't deserve to be happy. At the start of the season, he was already struggling with some self-hatred issues because of what happened in Chicago, and just when he started getting over those, Angstrom brought him down even lower. While Mark is accepting the situation he's in after killing Angstrom and trying to rationalize why he killed him, he says this: "I kinda won." He says this because, well, Angstrom did. Angstrom's primary goal was to make Mark suffer and then kill him. Angstrom achieved the first part, and with Mark stuck in the desert dimension, would have achieved the second part if not for the future Guardians showing up and getting Mark out. But even then, Mark is forever left with the scars that Angstrom gave him that day. So finally, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite aspects of Angstrom. Despite everything he's done, I just cannot bring myself to hate him. He should be the most hateable character ever. I mean, he snapped Debbie's arm, beat her, threw Oliver around knowing it would hurt him, and psychologically and physically tortured Mark by sending him through multiple dimensions before ultimately trying to kill him. And yet, I feel bad for him. Yeah, what he did was horrible. Yeah, it was unjustified as everyone involved was innocent, but when Angstrom has that breakdown because Mark said he tried to save him, those few memories we see of the evil Marks, especially the one where he kills Angstrom's son right in front of him, it just makes it impossible for me to hate him. He's not the Joker, where despite looking crazy, he's fully aware of exactly what he's doing and how it affects others and takes pleasure in that. While yeah, Angstrom is enjoying making Mark suffer, it's not just because Angstrom is the evil guy, so he's evil. Angstrom is mentally unwell and needs help. He sees Mark suffering as what Mark deserves due to the millions, if not billions, of people that the other Marks have killed. Angstrom was not a bad person before the accident. Sure, he had a bit of an ego, but besides that, he was a great guy. All of the alternate Angstroms that we've peered into also appeared to be generally good guys, and it makes seeing what Angstrom turned into sad. I can't blame Mark for losing control, and even though what he did was horrible and unforgivable, I can't see Angstrom as an irredeemable monster. And that's great. I love that about Angstrom. It makes him such an interesting character to think about. It's a running theme with the main two antagonists so far. Omni-Man did horrible, unforgivable, monstrous things on Earth, but I just can't hate him because he was indoctrinated from birth to believe that what he was doing was right. He truly believed the Viltrum Empire's propaganda, but after realizing what he did to all those innocent people, to his son, he reflects, he changes and starts to grow as a person. And I'm sure in season 3 he'll only continue to grow. Angstrom is the opposite of Omni-Man. Where Omni-Man starts off evil and starts to move towards the light, Angstrom starts off good but descends into the darkness. And despite this difference, both characters are shown to have some level of being redeemable. Omni-Man for growing and realizing that just because other beings have shorter lives, it doesn't mean their lives are worthless, and Angstrom for getting the help he needs to make him realize what he's done and atone for it. And that's the end of this video. I really love Invincible, and as soon as I get some extra income, I'm getting the compendiums. I cannot wait 30 more years just to get season 4. Anyways, yeah, that's it. I think I've said enough about Angstrom Levy, but just to end the video off, did the Guardians just not look for survivors? Cecil told the Guardians to look for survivors of the machine's destruction, but both the Mauler and Angstrom were just chilling there. So are the Guardians just stupid?